Welcome to the Journeymen podcast. I'm Joseph Corlett.
I'm Mark Reeves.
Join us as we travel from club to club, delving into the stories, tales and myths that have helped define the ethos and identities of football clubs all over the world.
We'll look at club history from all angles, whether it be team's tactical style, superstitious fan rituals, or discussing the best players to grace the shirt.
For our base in Berlin, we aspire to give clubs of all sizes the platform to discuss their greatest triumphs and toughest heartbreaks.
We'll take you through fascinating untold stories with tales of heroes, villains, promotions, relegations, and everything in between.
Welcome back to episode 5 of the Journeymen podcast. We took a little break. I don't think you can really blame us for staying in northern Portugal around this time. Porto, we enjoyed diving into a lot. We want to say a quick thank you to all the feedback, the fans who got in touch. We just had some great feedback over the past break we had whilst after making that episode.
Yeah, and the Porto fans were great. We chatted with them in a few forums, different Facebook groups and things. We got some really great feedback from them, and also to everyone that entered the shirt competition, which we did at the time. It feels like a long time ago now. But yeah, thanks to all the Porto fans for making us feel welcome as we covered their club.
It's been great covering the Dragons, but unfortunately Porto, we're going to have to move on. How about you tell us, Mark, what's the link into our new football club we'll be diving into?
So, keeping Porto fans maybe slightly on board with this, so that our link is that it's a club that was also managed by Sir Bobby Robson, who we covered in great detail last time out, and they play in very similar colours to FC Porto.
It is, of course, Ipswich Town Football Club. Last time we looked out, as we said, Sir Bobby Robson, we looked at his kind of post-England moves around Europe, what he did after the England job, and this time we'll be diving into the early years of this legend and his time building up to the England job and at Ipswich Town.
Yep, so Ipswich Town, and I feel like we've got a few, I don't know, international listeners now, so maybe, Ipswich, what the hell is that? What is an Ipswich? So Ipswich Town is a club known as the Blues or the Tractor Boys nickname, and the club got the moniker of the Tractor Boys from their own fans, actually. It was coined when Ipswich was competing against bigger build clubs in the Premier League. And it's just a classic example of self-depreciating British humour, really, referring to Ipswich's agricultural heritage.
Most nicknames come to teams at the very beginnings of their history and heritage, but this one's a very modern nickname in contrast with many others. And it's not really certain, but one of the first examples of this being used was, in fact, by opposition fans, when Ipswich were beating Leeds United 2-1, and the Leeds fans started chanting, "We're being beaten by a bunch of tractor drivers." And in a way of kind of self-deprecating, they adopted this nickname, and basically any time they went 1-0 up, they started chanting, "1-0 to the Tractor Boys, 1-0 to the Tractor Boys." And yeah, I think it's hilarious, to be fair. It's brilliant. I love this type of humour.
I think, though, a feature that we've had a few comments from now of people, I think the most important feature of the podcast.
This is 100% your favourite piece of the entire thing.
And also, I want to take this moment to do a public service announcement, is that I will not be using the word ever e-football or anything like this. It is PES and will always be PES. So the important part, what were this team called on Pro Evolution Soccer, is of course East Anglia Town. Pretty
simple, and actually probably one of the better jobs, I think, from the Konami lot.
Yeah, I think when they stuck to regions and things, they were a lot better than Man Red, Man Blue,
Bucktail FC, Blackpool in our first episode, which is a bit Bucktail.
Bucktail, it's something quite Harry Potter and magical about it, though, I think. But East Anglia Town is, I think, pretty solid, although it's no West Midlands village.
I'll be honest, my previous knowledge on Ipswich Town, other than Bobby Robson, and that, to be honest, came from researching about FC Porto. They kind of came together quite a lot. And the relative successful period in the 90s leading into the millennium, I didn't really know too much. I think this was more Mark's kind of cup of tea, I think.
My sort of knowledge of it is just in our lifetime, really. It's been a solid, respectable championship side, which I remember sort of at one point with big sort of ambitions when Roy Keane came in and signed what felt like about 15 Sunderland players, spending big on the Hungarian Tamas Priskin, I remember, only for him to disappoint everybody. Yeah, just a pretty solid side, and then of course more recent stuff with what happened with Mick McCarthy and things like that.
The flag is up for offside against Brazil, and Ipswich win the UEFA Cup on an aggregate of 5 goals to 4 after a thrilling second leg here, which AZ won on the night 4-2. But Ipswich Town have lifted a trophy in their 66th match of the season, and 7,000 and more fans from Suffolk are able now to celebrate at the end of this dramatic season for their
as
club.
Mark mentioned, we might have pulled along a couple of people from Porto or maybe from Hamburg in our past episodes, and they're thinking, where is Ipswich? What is Ipswich? Well, we can tell you it is a town in the county of Suffolk in the region called East Anglia, basically in the southeast of England. It's about 132 kilometres from London.
And of course, we like these traditions that we keep accidentally doing. And once again, we're covering a club that is a port. So yeah, I think we really love the sea air, or just water. Like, we like water on the podcast for some reason.
Its population is a little smaller than Porto's, with only over 178,000 people inhabiting the greater kind of built-up area.
And we have it on good authority that Ipswich's modern name is derived from the medieval name, I'm going to absolutely murder this, I'm sure, Gipitswick, would you say?
I think you did an okay job, to be fair.
So this may have a relation to the fact the town is based near the rivers Orwell and Gipping, but this hasn't been 100% proven, but it seems pretty logical, and I'm not going to dispute it. But please, Ipswich residents, if I've murdered that, and if you know of a better way that the town got the name from, please let us know.
Like many towns and cities in the United Kingdom, it was originally a Roman settlement that would grow to become an important trade point because of it being a port city that looks out into the North Sea.
Yeah, and I think this loosely links us back up to Hamburg, as during the 14th and 17th centuries, Ipswich would continue to be an important trade post for the Hanseatic League, the port being used for imports and exports into the Baltics. And the Hanseatic League was a successful commercial and defensive confederation featuring ports from Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, UK, Sweden, Poland.
But moving into more modern times, in 2007, Ipswich was awarded as the honour of having the cleanest town award.
I can vouch. I've been to Ipswich and I walked along the little marinery thing, and it was very, very clean and tidy.
Despite the prior industry links, in the modern day, Ipswich is more known for being an agricultural town or agricultural area with Suffolk. The industry around Ipswich has always had a strong farming bias, and a fun fact, it is notable as the first commercially available motorised lawnmower was built in the Ipswich area in 1902.
I did not know that, and it's also something I didn't expect to find out. Yes, moving on, that's your sort of location geography. We'll move on to a bit of football-y geography. So the stadium, the heartbeat of any club, Ipswich play their football at Portman Road, and it's based right in the very centre of the town, proper English town centre style, like ground right in the middle. Capacity of, I think, just over 30,000.
It's been the home of the Blues since 1884, but has also hosted many England youth international matches and one single England senior team friendly international match against Croatia in 2003. This was a dive back through the past.
Yeah, and we had a look through the BBC match report for this lone England fixture. So David Beckham would give England the lead. Injured Nicky Butt would be replaced by Frank Lampard, and Michael Owen would make it 2. Ivica Mornar pulled a goal back for Croatia before Lampard would get a spectacular third for England, and a few other little bits that we pulled out from this game. So it was actually, amazingly, in 2003, it was John Terry's first ever start for England. And then what must have been an amazing moment for, I presume, many Ipswich fans were packed in the stadium that night, with hometown hero Kieran Dyer coming on as a substitute for England, which is amazing. And it also must have been amazing for Kieran Dyer as well to do that in your stadium of the town where you're born. It's pretty amazing. And Sir Bobby Robson was a guest of honour at the match.
But heading back into the past, Ipswich played their early matches at a different ground at Broomhill Park. But in 1884, the club moved to Portman Road and have played there ever since. The ground was also used as a cricket pitch during the summer by East Suffolk Cricket Club and have played there since 1855, so going back a really long time.
Just a few years later, in 1890, Ipswich became one of the first clubs to actually implement the use of goal nets. And at this time, Ipswich were an amateur team. The side didn't become professional until 1936. And the first visit of a professional club came in 1892 when Preston North End rolled into town and played a Suffolk County Football Association team.
This was followed 6 years later by a visit from Aston Villa, a game which was so popular that a temporary stand was erected in order to accommodate the huge crowd of about 5,000 people. In 1901, a tobacco processing plant was built along the south edge of the ground by the Churchman brothers, a name which would later become synonymous with the South Stand located there. The first permanent stand, a wooden structure affectionately known as the Chicken Run, give me a little laugh reading that, was built on the Portman Road side of the ground in 1906, and this structure was sold on in 1971 to a local speedway team called the Ipswich Witches, who installed it as their own stadium. So, passing on to different sports. I quite like that.
Pretty cool. In 1914, the ground was commandeered by the British Army for use as a training camp during the First World War. And control of Portman Road was not returned to the club in 2 years after the end of the war, and significant work was required to repair the damage caused by all the heavy machinery, tanks and things.
Can't imagine the groundsmen were would have had much time to look after the turf during World War One. You know, there would have been some. Imagine him pulling out his lawnmower. No, there's bigger things to do, Jeff. There's a lot more stuff going on and he's just like, I just want to mow the lawn. Sorry.
But also, do you know when you get like clubs that like it's a football team and a rugby team sharing a stadium, and you know like the football fans be, oh, like bloody rugby team are on it on Sunday. It's going to be the bloody army were there with the tanks on Sunday. All right, mess.
The highest attendance ever recorded at Portman Road is 38,010 for a match against Leeds United in the FA Cup 6th round on the 8th of March in 1975. This was before it became all-seating, whereas the record for the modern all-seated version of the stadium is 30,152, set in the December of 2003 against local rivals Norwich City in the League One division.
And the stadium has also hosted several music concerts, big names, including Elton John, R.E.M., Red Hot Chili Peppers, Neil Diamond, Tina Turner, Rod Stewart. A little throwback to our first episode in Blackpool, as Rod Stewart and Neil Diamond also performed at Bloomfield Road as well.
The former groundsman Alan Ferguson received a number of accolades. So I'd made that joke about the pitch before. I forgot about this bit, to be fair, in the script. Won many accolades for his maintenance of the pitch, including both Premiership and Championship Groundsman of the Year. And the pitch was voted the best in the Championship for 3 consecutive seasons in 2003, 2004 and 2005. So I'm sorry, Alan, for, or maybe your great father, maybe. But good work then.
Clearly the army's damages didn't last, and Alan managed to rescue. I'm just imagining like Ipswich fans outside of an army base, like, you know, Championship pitch of the year, you'll never sing that or something.
As we've already nodded to there with the modern attendance record being against their local rivals, it is Norwich City, of course. The derby is often called as the Old Farm Derby, as a comical take on the Old Firm Derby play between bitter Scottish rivals Celtic and Rangers. Again, love the humour there.
I absolutely love that. The Old Farm Derby is absolute genius. It's so good. So good. So, big rivalry. And as the clubs have tended to play in the same division, the derby's been contested most years, so around 115 times in competitive games. Norwich have 47 victories, Ipswich 45, with 23 finishing as a draw.
Despite just over 75 kilometres separating the two towns, it doesn't water down the tension between sets of fans, as former referee Keith Hackett states, as for most aggressive atmosphere I've ever encountered, believe or not, it was down at Carrow Road for Norwich versus Ipswich Town. There's certain derby fixtures that you always know you're going to get, it's going to be highly charged, but the East Anglican derby tops the lot.
The first derby held between the two clubs was in November 1902. When both teams were actually still playing at amateur level. However, there doesn't seem to be any real record of the result. However, the first Norfolk and Suffolk League fixture derby was played in Norwich and finished 1-0 to Norwich City. And the first National League game between the two clubs in the 3rd Division South at the time, in September 1939, was played at Portman Road, and the match finished 1-1.
Some of the more notable meetings between the two clubs have come in cup competitions as well. In the 72-73 season, Ipswich beat Norwich 4-2 on aggregate to win the two-legged Texaco Cup. 2-1 wins in both games, and we're coming back to you on this one, so don't you worry. In 1985, the clubs met in the semi-final of the League Cup, with a place at Wembley at stake. Ipswich won the first leg 1-0 at Portman Road, but Norwich scored early in the second leg at Carrow Road to level the tie. With extra time looming, Steve Bruce scored the late winner to send Norwich to Wembley. Heartbreak for the Tractor Boys.
Imagine the intensity of meeting your biggest rival there in the semi-final of the League Cup with a place at Wembley at stake is very intense. And in the 14-15 season, there were 4 East Anglian derbies, because the sides met in the two-legged Championship playoff semi-final, in addition to the 2 normal games played during the season. The first match of the season was held at Portman Road, and it finished with Norwich winning 1-0. And the reverse fixture at Carrow Road, Norwich again won, this time 2-0. And the playoff ties were held in May, and the first one was at Ipswich, finished 1-1. And the second leg with Norwich taking their 3rd derby victory of the season, winning 3-1, and therefore booking their place in the playoff final. It's got to hurt.
So it's been equally good times and bad times throughout the history of this derby, but currently it's a bit of a down period for the Tractor Boys. As of February 2019, Norwich have not been beaten by Ipswich in a competitive derby match since April 2009. So that's now spanning 12 years now.
But yeah, the derbies don't just stop with Norwich in a unique way. Ipswich actually have rivalries with every other team in their county. So the clubs located within East Anglia battle to be the pride of Anglia in an unofficial title celebrated by fans of the clubs involved.
These clubs include Cambridge United, Colchester United, Ipswich Town, Norwich City, Peterborough United and Southend United, although by modern geographical reckoning Essex is not really considered part of East Anglia. But anyway, foreign listeners are going, what the hell are you talking about? Well, anyway, let's keep it simple.
Yeah, and there's no actual like trophy for winning this. It's just, it's essentially bragging rights. However, we did, when we were doing our research, we did find Colchester United managed to finish 10th in the second tier, ahead of Ipswich and Norwich, 14th and 16th respectively, and the rest were all in lower divisions. So Colchester were the highest finishing team from East Anglia. So I'm guessing usually this award is going to be won by Ipswich and Norwich. These are the two biggest clubs. So Colchester were not going to let this moment slip. And they were presented with a Pride of Anglia trophy to award for beating the other teams, but it's not great. It literally looks like when you played football as a kid and, like generic football man kicking ball, that kind of level, really.
Proper under-9s, Sunday, one-day tournament type of vibe.
I'm looking at a picture of it now, and it's like a generic ball. If you squinted at a World Cup replica that was bought from like a pound shop or something, I think.
Bless Marie partner who went down and collected it. Enjoy the moment, Colchester, I guess. But yeah, that trophy does not look that impressive.
I'd love it if Ipswich won it the year after and were like demanded that the trophy was then passed on to them or something.
And again, sorry Ipswich fans, but currently fans of Norwich can claim that their club is the pride of Anglia despite finishing bottom of the Premier League under the two most common methods of deciding it, the most recent league position and the most recent result in the East Anglican derby. So yeah, even when Norwich finish bottom of the Premier League and get relegated, they are still, unfortunately, the pride of Anglia.
I think that's enough talk for Norwich for now, before we've probably all our Ipswich fans have turned off by now. So let's talk about your friendships. So we've got a great relationship with Fortuna Dusseldorf, which I don't think either of us knew before we looked into this. It seems, I don't know, random when you first read it, but then you get into it and yeah, it seems like a strong bond between the two clubs. So yeah, Ipswich has this bond with Fortuna Dusseldorf, and some of their fans visit Portman Road each season or in like the pre-season. Ipswich fans do the same to show their support during home matches. It seemed like we were looking for like how it started, but it seems to have just started out of just a strong respect for each other and how the clubs do things, I think.
As Mark mentions there, Ipswich and Fortuna have very like comparable histories, being strong at the end of the 1970s and the beginning of the 80s when Ipswich were on the up. Fortuna were also in the same period winning the German Cup twice, and they were in and around the UEFA Cup and all this type of stuff. And the same year when Ipswich lost to Barcelona, that's a little tidbit for coming up, in the quarterfinals, they beat FC Cologne on the way to losing to Barcelona, and FC Cologne and Dusseldorf are huge rivals. It's kind of one of those situations where it's an enemy of my enemy is, well, a friend of mine type of thing. So early beginnings of this friendship.
Fortuna Blues is the name of the Dusseldorf branch of Ipswich's fan culture, and one member stated, "The way I would see it is we're both old school clubs. Ipswich is old school, Dusseldorf is old school. We love Portman Road. I know some other old English stadiums and grounds, but Ipswich still has that character. They've not lost it."
Prior to the 15-16 season, the two teams would finally meet on the pitch for the first time as they prepared themselves for their domestic seasons with a friendly that was played in Dusseldorf. In one report prior to the friendly, it stated, "It's a meeting of friends which has been nearly a decade in the making."
This close bond between the two sets of fans took a incredible, more personal step in January last year when a Dusseldorf supporter, Joe Sturr, needed urgent medical attention while at Portman Road, with Ipswich fan Kylie Melapeu acting quickly to save his life. After spending a number of weeks in hospital in his homeland, Mr. Sturr was back in Suffolk in January this year to watch the Blues defeat to Derby and to meet the woman who saved his life.
There is also this nice story of how this friendship between the clubs led to two fans of either team marrying each other in 2019. Graham Carter, 68, wore the colours of his beloved Ipswich Town when he married the other love of his life, Enos, 62, a Fortuna fan.
Yeah, Graham had gone over to see Ipswich play in the friendly we mentioned before in Germany and met Enos outside a pub in the city's popular Old Town district. They exchanged emails and the rest is history.
Uli Hildener, a chairman of the Fortuna Blues fan club, added, "When Enos and Graham met, the god of football was involved. There is no doubt about that. And the Dusseldorf-Ipswich connection was the perfect environment for this lovely commitment."
It's incredible the fact that for all these years, these fans have wanted to come over to support and follow the town. It's just amazing. And they're just such a brilliant group of people that we've just, over the years, we've become good friends and built that relationship. And it's just amazing.
For me, it's all about passion. And the fact that we've got so many of our wonderful Dusseldorf friends here just goes to show what the passion is all about.
From this unexpected marriage, we now jump into the very beginnings of Ipswich Town. Where did they come from? How did they start? The forming of the club.
Yeah, so the club was founded as an amateur side in 1878 and was known originally as Ipswich AFC. And their first match was a 6-1 home victory over Stoke Wanderers in the November of their founding year. This was followed by a 2-0 victory over Harwich in the club's first ever away match.
The club won their first trophy in the 86-87 season, and that's 1886, by the way, not 1986. So they triumphed 2-1 against the team representing Ipswich School in the final of the Suffolk Challenge Cup.
Yeah, and in 1890 the club entered the qualifying rounds of the FA Cup for the first time. They were knocked out in the final qualifying round by the 93rd Highlanders, which was an infantry regiment from the British Army.
I'm not going to lie, all the teams we've mentioned sound like Pez made up names, especially Stoke Wanderers. Sounds like they were like, oh, well, we mixed up Stoke City and Bolton Wanderers and put them together in the game.
Yeah, Stoke Wanderers does sound made up. And then 93rd Highlanders also feels like an American basketball team as well, I think.
Having received invitations to join from both the Southern League and the Norfolk and Suffolk League, Ipswich joined the latter in the 1899-1900 season, finishing 4th in the first ever league season. We are going way back here.
And they were league runners-up in the 1902-03 season. And in 1903, they also entered a team into the new South East Anglian League, where its inaugural champions. And they left the South East Anglian League in 1906, but continued playing in the Norfolk and Suffolk League.
In 1907, Ipswich became founding members of the Southern Amateur League. The club narrowly avoided relegation in many of the following seasons, unfortunately, and suffered a club record defeat 15-1 at the hands of Corinthians at Portman Road on New Year's Day in 1910.
Corinthian FC was actually an English amateur football team based in London between 1882 and 1939, and a pretty influential club. So Real Madrid's club colours are owed to Corinthian FC, which is pretty crazy. And also the Corinthians you may have heard of in Brazil, like they adopted their name from this original Corinthians FC in London. And in our bit of research, what we found out, like, the club was all based on the Corinthian spirit, so all about having the highest standard of sportsmanship. And this was famously summed up by their attitude to penalties, because as far as they were concerned, a gentleman would never commit a deliberate foul on an opponent. So if a penalty was awarded against Corinthians, the goalkeeper would stand aside, lean on the goalpost, and just let the opposition kick it into the net.
Wow.
And if Corinthians themselves won a penalty, their captain, this was the captain's responsibility to do this, the Corinthian spirit, the captain would take a short run-up before smashing the ball as hard as he could, whacking it as far as he could over the crossbar. Yeah, pretty amazing.
But back to Ipswich Town, the outbreak of the First World War, as we've already mentioned, meant the commandeering of Portman Road by the army, and this curtailed the 1914-15 season, and organised football didn't return until the 1920s.
And just 1 year later, Ipswich Town became the champions of the Southern Amateur League, clinching the title on the last day of the season. And the club won the league a further 3 times in the 29-30 season, 32-33 and 33-34, before becoming founding members of the Eastern Counties Football League at the end of 1934-35. And what you can see here is this classic chaos before having like a proper national football league in place where everybody is just joining different local county leagues and things like that. And I think Ipswich here have already been in about 5 or 6 different ones.
Keeping track of all the different names, the Southern Amateur, Eastern League, County, all this was a little bit of a headache when researching, but we cut through everything and found Ipswich's path. And with this developing football scene growing in success and popularity at a local level, businessman Leonard P. Thompson threatened to lead a breakaway from the amateur club to create an entirely separate professional club, Ipswich United, in 1936.
And what I find quite interesting here is like Ipswich, the forerunner of the team, this Ipswich AFC, like we found, it goes back to the 1800s and is like one of the very first clubs. But then we look here and we're getting into the 30s and they still don't have a professional club. When you look at most football teams are like the early 1900s have been founded. This is 1936 and they're only just having talk of turning professional.
And now they're having arguments about what to do professionally, because John Murray Codholt, the then club president, called together rival factions for a meeting at the town hall in Ipswich in the May of 1936, at which it was agreed, finally put everything to bed, that Ipswich Town would finally turn professional. So clearly there were some lads there thinking we're not good enough, or maybe, or some clearly saw the potential of becoming a professional football team. And the club was eventually elected to the Southern League for the 1936-37 season, and former Irish international footballer Mick O'Brien was appointed as the club's first ever professional manager.
Yeah, and the club's first professional game at Portman Road resulted in a 4-1 win against Tunbridge Wells Rangers, and the club went on to win the Southern League in their debut season. O'Brien left after just 1 season following the death of his wife. This is where our first notable character comes into play, and we need to talk about Ipswich's longest serving manager in terms of of days in charge.
Ipswich would appoint a man called Scott Duncan as manager, and he would stay in the role for a staggering 6,487 days, from November 1937 to August 1955.
Even Pardew with his 7-year contract couldn't compete with that, could he?
No, that does not compare at all.
So as a player, he'd been part of Newcastle's 1908-09 league winning side.
He'd also crossed the old firm battle lines by being a Rangers player prior to World War I, but then playing for Celtic during the wartime. But it would be Scotland where he'd get his first taste of management too, and he would retire from playing at the end of the 1922-23 season. But he knew exactly what he was doing, as Duncan was appointed as secretary manager of Hamilton Academical in the summer of 1923. He went straight from being less than a year out, and he was straight into management.
And by October 1925, he would take over as secretary manager of Cowdenbeath and had 7 successful years at the club, keeping him in the Scottish First Division throughout his time in charge. The impression he'd made in Scotland led him to be appointed as secretary manager of Manchester United in June 1932. Does this ring any bells to you? Successful Scotsman impresses and gets Manchester United job. It's a nice precursor to Ferguson in our Aberdeen episode, maybe.
However, this doesn't quite go as smoothly as Sir Alex Ferguson. Despite spending a lot of money on players, United were almost relegated to the third division the 33-34 season. However, Duncan did turn things around and led United back into the second tier in the 35-36 season. However, they were then relegated again the following season. He resigned from his post in 1937, so not quite as successful as...
I guess he didn't have the moment where he's on the pitch like, you've got to stand by your next manager, Fergie style. So Scott Duncan would leave Man United in the third tier of English football, at which time it was split into North and South. But his next step would see him drop down a further step to the Southern Amateur League, which is where Ipswich Town come back into our story.
Scott will be in charge as Ipswich joined the Football League in the 3rd Division South, as mentioned before, despite only finishing 3rd in the Southern Amateur League. The season prior, they stormed to the Southern League title, winning it 5 points clear of Norwich City's B team, thanks to 26 goals from Jock Carter. Aldershot and Exeter City finished in the bottom 2 spots of the 3rd Division South, and all 3 teams went up for re-election in hopes of staying or joining the split 3rd tier of English football.
And this sounds a bit confusing, so just to explain how this promotion and relegation system worked back then, it's a bit almost like the Super League venture from the other year. So until the mid-1980s, admission to the Football League was by election. So at the end of each season, clubs at the bottom of the Football League were obliged to seek re-election. And the bottom clubs essentially had to go begging at the AGM of the Football League and have a vote by all of their sort of league colleagues, who also would consider the applications of ambitious non-Football League clubs to then join this elite group. The non-leaguers were often scathing of this method, because you can imagine how hard it's going to be to try and get into this closed shop. And the election procedure was like it feels almost like a Mason's kind of weird secret handshake, old pals kind of thing. And so, yeah, most likely the clubs that were trying to get re-election who finished at the bottom would get it and would stay, and these non-league clubs trying to get in just simply wouldn't.
So there were 98 votes cast in the 36-37 elections, and as mentioned before, it would prove to be a close shop, as Exeter would get 40 votes and Aldershot 34 votes to Ipswich's just 24, meaning that the 2 clubs that had finished bottom of the league stayed in the league despite...
It's pretty outrageous, really, when you think Ipswich have, smashed the Southern League, won the title, 5 points clear, and essentially what's your reward?
The following season wouldn't be quite as impressive for Ipswich Town, as they'd finished 3rd in the league behind winners Guildford City and second place Plymouth Argyle's B team. However, Guildford would not go forward with trying to get elected to the 3rd tier, and the opportunity was passed down to Ipswich.
So I think this is how little faith you can see clubs have in the system here, of like, they've won the league, Guildford, and they're like, there's no point even doing it. But to Ipswich's benefit, they go on the campaign trail, with Walsall and Gillingham being the Football League teams to be up against. However, the Football League closed shop would be opened up for the Blues at the expense of Gillingham, as Ipswich won the vote with 36 votes. Walsall stayed up with 34, and Gillingham would go down with only 24 votes. So I think if you're Guildford City there, you're going to feel sick, aren't you?
So there we go, a tale to tell the grandkids of amazing football bureaucracy that benefited Ipswich Town in allowing them into the Football League for the first time. We dug for reasons why Ipswich pulled off such an upset in the polls. Like, I'm having to talk like this is a politician's race here. But we couldn't find anything other than the results. We'd love to know what Ipswich promised to the AGM to bring to the Football League that Gillingham couldn't or didn't, or were Gillingham just not that liked at the time? To be fair, Ipswich had kept their consistent results in the lower leagues, and maybe just the close shot went, nah, Gillingham, you've been bad for a couple of seasons, I don't know. And then they were like, no, it's time for Ipswich Town, maybe.
Maybe it's the last 2 seasons they've finished essentially in the top 3. But it would be interesting to know how the campaign trail went, like you say, what promises were given.
However, despite going through all this trouble to finally join the National Leagues, they would only have 1 season in the league, finishing in a respectable 7th place before, unfortunately, the breakout of World War II and put a stop to the league. The club's last competitive match before the league was suspended was, funny enough, a 1-1 draw against rivals Norwich City.
Couldn't write it, could you? So, unfortunately, the club president who'd helped stop Ipswich Town from splitting into 2 teams, John Murray Cobbold, and director Robert Neville Cobbold, were killed during the war, and the position of director was filled by John Cavendish Cobbold, and this was an Ipswich brewing family, very prominent in the town. Their ancestors and various people who will, through their family, their name will pop up a few times during the episode.
Despite the small interruption of a war and the changes in the boardroom, Duncan continued to manage the club and would record 3 successive top 8 finishes before slumping to consecutive 17th place finishes. During this period, you'd see Scott Duncan develop Ipswich's first ever star player, and he would be a striker by the name of Tom Gurneys.
So Tom Gurneys would have an unsuccessful stint at Brentford, who were a 2nd Division side at the time, only registered 11 appearances in 2 years. But dropping into the 3rd Division South with Ipswich is where he found his home, and he stayed with the club for 8 seasons under the guidance of Scott Duncan for the majority of this time. And in the first of the 17th place finishes that Joey just mentioned, he'd rack up 20 goals and then 24 goals the following season. And we were thinking here, is he literally the only person scoring in this team, because they're finishing 17th in the league, but they've still got a player getting 20 plus goals.
It's a cliche that lives to this day of a promoted team comes up and goes, whatever their striker is, if he can get us 15 to 20 goals, we'll be sound. So clearly the Tom Gurneys here was just doing enough to keep them in the division here with their 17th place finishes. But things would finally click into gear for Ipswich, as in the 1953-54 season, Tom would get another 24 goals, and this would power them to the league title and promotion to Division 2 for the first time in the club's history. Finally, he has some support.
So this guy, as we're already seeing here, is a bit of a machine, and would actually finish his Ipswich career with 148 goals in 273 appearances, and actually later would run a pub in the town as well, which is quite nice.
Classic lovely story, footballer's lovely story type of thing. Scores a ton of goals for a team and then just goes, I'm going to give ale to a load of fans in the local area.
It comes up, especially when we look at a lot of clubs in these early sort of eras, where you'll have a player who's not remotely from this town, goes there, does amazing, and then just lives there for the rest of his life. You're not going to get Mo Salah is going to live in Liverpool for the rest of his life and open up a little corner shop or a pub or something.
I mean, I would love it if he did, but
can we bring this back? I want to see Gaston Ramirez running a shop in Hull or something like that.
As they climbed into the 2nd Division, they would have to fight bravely against relegation and would fall 3 points short, despite Tom Gurneys getting another 21 goals at the 2nd tier. So despite him jumping up another level, he was still just powering the goals for the Tractor Boys.
Absolute beast goal scorer at this sort of era, and he finished as the club top goal scorer for 4 seasons in a row and became the first professional Ipswich player to score 4 times in a game. So complete goal machine. Following
the relegation back down to Division 3 South, Scott Duncan would step down as manager of Ipswich Town. Despite resigning, he stayed on at the club in a secretarial role for a further 3 years. However, his replacement was a managerial novice, former England international and double championship winner at Tottenham Hotspur, a little name known as Alf Ramsay.
Of course, especially if you're an English football fan, you of course have heard of Sir Alf Ramsay, and he'd played a total of 250 competitive games with Tottenham in all competitions across 6 seasons. And he said he was 35 years old and people were concerned about his future, and he later wrote he didn't really know what was going to happen to him, and he knew his days of a player were numbered, and he knew that his respect would only get him so far, and this was slowly going to go downhill as his playing days ended. So he decided to stay in the game, start his coaching training, and despite not having any real qualifications or experience, set off trying to find a manager's job.
In search of experience, he would go to some kind of off-the-beaten-track places, as he spent the off-season of the 1955 season coaching in southern Rhodesia. However, this is where Ipswich Town saw some potential, strangely. They managed to contact Ramsay and propose the idea of him becoming a player manager for the 3rd Division South club. Then Ramsay met the Ipswich hierarchy on his return from Africa, and he refused to combine the playing and management roles, saying, I told them I would only concentrate on one job. It would be impossible to play with the players I would be coaching.
And with this settled, Ipswich announced Ramsay's appointment as manager on the 9th of August 1955. And Ramsay joined Ipswich just after the club's relegation from the 2nd Division at the end of the 54-55 season. And this had been the team's only year above the 3rd tier up to that point.
At this point, Ipswich had neither glittering pedigree or status, nor, in quotes, a strong footballing tradition, and the club had only joined the Football League kind of in a later fashion, and its home at this point had become kind of small and a bit basic and a bit run down.
Ramsay would later say he had no plan for Ipswich when he went there. He said, in fact, the first thing he did was having to forget his ideas of how football should be played, because all of his experience has been in the First Division. And he got to Ipswich and realised, this was going to be a very different quality of player, and things were done, differently.
Ramsay kept most of the training staff hired by his predecessor, Scott Duncan, so I guess that would help with the transition. And Duncan, as we've mentioned, stayed on as club secretary too, meaning that Ramsay could just concentrate solely on the playing matters and leave administration and all that kind of boring admin stuff to Duncan.
So he had inherited a relegated side with a number of players of a mature age, to put it nicely. Ipswich were a tricky proposition for a new manager, especially as there was no real money to improve the squad. So Ramsay worked to make the most of whatever he had with the talent that he'd inherited.
He made tactical innovations noticed by the local newspaper. As early as his first game in charge, he had his team taking 3 distinct styles of corner kick.
And in Alf's first season in East Anglia, they'd finished third, only losing 7 times in league and scoring 106 goals in the process.
So this corner kick routines were clearly working then.
Clearly. And they'd continue to improve, going one better the following season as they'd win the Third Division South, and they would win the same amount of points as second place Torquay United, but it would be their superior goal average that clinched the title, with Ted Phillips netting 42 goals in the league on his own to help the Blues rack up 101 overall.
It's an incredible amount of goals. And in the second tier, they'd lay claim to a respectful 8th place finish. So again, they would step up and perform at the next level. But they would fall to 16th place in the following season before climbing back to 11th in the 1959-60 season.
You've got to think so far, considering Alf Ramsay, no real managerial experience, comes into a club where he can't buy a whole new squad. He's just having these training and tactical little innovations, and he's scoring a lot of goals. He's doing a hell of a job, and things would keep rolling. And so after 3 seasons in the second tier, and at this point Ipswich have never been in the top tier, in their 72nd season of competitive football, they finally got there. They finally got to the promised land. First time in their history, as they finished the season as champion to the second division, 1 point ahead of second placed Sheffield United.
It's funny, as they've been climbing the divisions, the names of the teams they've been getting above or beating have slowly become much more recognisable to us, getting ahead of Sheffield United, for example, instead of the 93rd Highlanders, which we mentioned not that long ago. Their successful season will be powered by the goals of Ray Crawford, as he fired home an astonishing 40 goals in 42 games. Ted Phillips also would help massively on the goal front, getting 30 in 42 as well. They scored exactly 100 goals in the league that season. Just lovely and satisfying. But yeah, imagine being outshined when you get 30 goals in a season. Poor Ted Phillips, but bloody hell, Crawford, that's amazing.
At least Ted Phillips can say he got 42 the season before. Yeah, and this successful season will be built upon 2 fantastic runs of form. So from late August to early October, they'd go unbeaten across 10 games. And then from mid-December to mid-March, they went on an even longer unbeaten run of 13 games.
One last strange note to be made of this season was the fact that they played both editions of the East Anglian Derby on back-to-back days. Ipswich would rock up to Carrow Road and stuff the Canaries 3-0 on their own home patch on Boxing Day, which is the 26th of December for any non-UK listeners, with 2 goals from Crawford and 1 from Phillips, obviously. And then the following day, on the 27th of December, Norwich would take the return trip to Portman Road, in which they would be thumped again 4-1. The Canaries would then take the lead after 80 minutes, but this time Crawford with 2, Phillips with 1, and Millward with another 1, rounding out the game with an 85th minute strike. Back-to-back Derby wins in back-to-back days is just a strange anomaly.
But I'm guessing what an amazing couple of days that was as an Ipswich fan. Not only, you've got the classic, it's Christmas, great food, lots of beer to drink, but then you also stuff your local rivals twice in 2 days.
7-1 aggregate score.
Pretty satisfying.
But again, guided by Alf Ramsay, Ipswich achieved promotion and another trophy in the cabinet.
And so, in the First Division for the first time in their history, and they would make history this season.
Can't imagine expectations would be too high, with their first top flight match being against Bolton Wanderers at Burden Park. It would end goalless, but Ipswich would be denied a late chance to win, of which Bolton couldn't complain, get 1 point out of this tie.
Yeah, they made a steady start to the league season, 12th place by the end of August, but amazingly, it slowly rose to compete with Burnley for the title. So they'd finally steadied themselves, get back on their feet and claim their first win, with another strange anomaly in the fixture schedule, similar to the East Anglian Derby last season. And their 4th game of the season would be at home to Burnley, just 1 week after playing the Clarets in Lancashire. At Portman Road, Ipswich would get revenge with a 6-2 win, and this would be a very crucial result come the end of the season.
4 days later, Ipswich Town would face West Bromwich Albion. The reason this is a notable fixture is because playing for the opposition would be future Ipswich manager and now legend Bobby Robson. However, Bobby couldn't do much as Ipswich sailed to a 3-1 victory, and they would even win another 2 games on the bounce, seeing them jump up to 5th place in the table.
Yeah, and Alf Ramsay's side continued to surprise the top division as they comfortably stayed in the top half of the table throughout the rest of September and October. They kicked off November with a 1-0 win over Nottingham Forest and would only lose 1 game for the rest of the month. December would prove to be a bit more inconsistent with all their wins coming at home over Chelsea, Bolton and Leicester, but losing away against Aston Villa and Man City.
January would only have 2 fixtures for the Blues, but Robson would be on the losing side of the team who'd eventually manage as Ipswich won 3-0, then lost 3-1 to Birmingham City. Despite the loss, they still incredibly sat in 4th place against all odds. So if this team has been exceeding expectations before moving into February, then they would absolutely obliterate them, as the Tractor Boys would go completely unbeaten through the second month of the year, beating Everton 4-2, Fulham away 2-1, drawing with West Ham United 2-2, and just maybe there was an outside shot at the title building here as they finished the month in 3rd. This is where we're getting into the business end, to use a proper football cliche.
If we're going football cliche, they've become a lot more than the breath of fresh air for the league, haven't they? They're smashing it, absolutely incredible. And from this point forward, Ipswich would put together what ultimately would be, spoiler, league-winning form for the rest of the season, because of the 13 fixtures they had left, they'd win 8, draw 5 and only lose 1, which was to serve Matt Busby's legendary Man United team.
On match day 36, an 88th minute winner by Doug Moran in a 3-2 battle against Wolverhampton Wanderers would see Ipswich top the table for the first time the entire season. They'd be chopped back down to 2nd place the following match day with a 5-0 loss to Man United, as we mentioned, but then would rise back to the top with a 1-0 win against Cardiff City.
And despite then having back-to-back 2-2 draws against Chelsea and Arsenal, they'd still claim top spot with just 2 games to go, with another fixture quirk that they'd roll on down to Highbury and thump Arsenal 3-0 with 1 goal for Phillips and 2 for Crawford. And while this is happening, Burnley were held by Lancashire rivals Blackpool to leave Ipswich top of the league, 2 points clear, but having played 1 more game than Burnley.
The possibility to complete this amazing fairy tale was in Ipswich's hands, as they had to beat Aston Villa at home to stand any chance of winning the league, as Burnley needed to beat Chelsea and then hope their superior goal difference would take them top if the Blues slipped up. The game was described as the moment of truth for East Anglia.
It's Ipswich Town then to kick off, attacking the goal to your left. And facing up to Aston Villa, who are no mean side in this league, of course.
In front of just over 28,000 people at Portman Road, the game would get underway. It would turn out to be, as you'd expect, of a title decider. Cagey, lacking in quality, and described simply as not a great game by the TV broadcast afterwards.
And after a goalless first half, it would be that man again, Ray Crawford. A header had struck the bar and he scored from the rebound. The packed crowds in Portman Road explode. They've had 70 minutes of all nervous energy building, and that is completely just gone, dissipated with this goal.
The noise is deafening. That was Crawford scoring his 39th goal of the season. To everyone here, utter relief, complete relief. Now perhaps Ipswich will show some kind of purpose. They've lacked, the crowd has certainly erupted all of a sudden. They were very lethargic for a long time, as were the players. Now it's all of a sudden. The sun has come out and shines over the whole of East Anglia.
Just 5 minutes later, as Villa attacked, a long ball on the counter-attack was chased down by Crawford. The crowd rallying behind him as he tried to control the ball. Both an Aston Villa defender and the goalkeeper lunged to try and stop the Blue striker, but the ball just bobbles away from the goalkeeper's reach, giving Crawford the easy task of regaining his balance and tapping the ball into an empty net. The crowd once again explodes as they see this as the confirmation goal. Ipswich Town would see out the last 15 minutes, and as the final whistle blew, the home crowd poured onto the pitch to celebrate with their team. And after the news of Burnley's home draw with Chelsea, it was confirmed that Ipswich were league champions. Back-to-back league champions. What an achievement. Division 2 and Division 1 back-to-back. Wow.
And it's Crawford away. Crawford's away. Oh, and the goalkeeper, what a magnificent save, and Crawford makes it number 2.
Absolutely incredible. And I think the thing that obviously it's amazing to get promoted to the top division and then win it in your first year. It's just completely mental. But also when we look at the league position history throughout the season, like we mentioned, they hadn't been first all year until like the 36th game in the 36th game week.
One reporter managed to get onto the pitch and asked Alf Ramsay post-match, stating, "You've won the First Division in your first season, and I feel a real deal of this is down to you. How do you feel?" And Alf responded quite calmly and measuredly on the video, "I feel fine, and I'm delighted. I'm delighted for everyone."
It was the first time a club had won the Championship at the first time of asking, with the exception of Preston North End, who'd won the inaugural title in 1888-89 season. That doesn't count. Come on, this is incredible. Like, they've been promoted, first ever time. Ray Crawford was the club's top goal scorer. He equalled Derek Kevin of West Brom as the league's top goal scorer with 33.
Kenneth Wolstenholme, the commentator who would later utter the famous line, "Some people are on the pitch, they think it's all over. It is now," as Geoff Hurst ran through on goal to basically win the World Cup for England. He would have to eat some humble pie, as he had promised Ipswich Town champagne if they were able to pull off this outsider's shot at the First Division title. He stated, "A few weeks ago I promised the Ipswich fans champagne if they won the league championship, and well, the club and supporters, they have got it."
Yeah, I can't imagine Roy Keane going and giving some champagne to a team if they won the league title nowadays.
No, I can't imagine Gary Neville being like, "Here you go, Mo Salah," or "Here you go, Erling Haaland next year." I cannot imagine that whatsoever.
So then the TV programme cuts to shots of the players and the management team opening all these bottles of champagne. And I've never been so happy to give away someone else's booze, states the presenter as he pours a glass for Alf Ramsay. Kenneth was foolish enough to think you couldn't win the league championship. Gives Alf the glass. "Here are your 6 bottles, but on behalf of all of us, congratulations. By goodness, you've shaken British football today."
During the later celebrations, one reporter summed up Ipswich's achievements brilliantly when speaking to Alf. "You've done a tremendous thing, haven't you, for football today, in that you brought this small club, which 5 years ago was playing 3rd Division football, through the 2nd Division and now 1st Division and to the League Championship. At the beginning of the season, 8 months ago, people weren't giving you a chance of staying in this league for more than a year." And Alf Ramsay would reply in that polite tone, "Ah yes, I suppose when one looks at it that way, we have. We've done a wonderful job. But I can't do this alone. I feel that I work hard, and I am certain the players have worked just as hard as I have."
Matt Busby would describe the title winners as one of the First Division's most attractive sides, and it was the first major trophy of Ipswich's history. And Ipswich players Rory Bailey, Larry Carberry, John Ellsworthy, Ted Phillips and Jimmy Ledbetter become the first players to have won the 1st Division, now the Premier League, the 2nd, now the Championship, the 3rd, now League One, medals with the same club, and a feat that has only been equalled, can you tell me who, Joey? One more person since that.
The only thing I'm going to guess it's from someone in the Leicester City team, and that's the only thing. I don't know, and I can't name a player, I'll be honest.
You're warm, you're very warm. So yeah, Andy King is the only other person to do it along with these Ipswich players in the 15-16 season when they won the Premier League. He'd also won League One and the Championship with Leicester.
During this season with Ipswich, 17 players represented the team in the League Cup and FA Cup. Only defender Andy Nelson was ever present, appearing in all 42 league games, all 5 League Cup and FA Cup ties. Crawford was the top scorer with 37 goals and shared the league top scorer with Derek Kevin, as we've mentioned, from West Brom, both scoring 33 in the league. For Ipswich, Crawford was followed by Phillips with 36 and Moran on 18. In 5 years as manager, Alf Ramsay had taken Ipswich from the 3rd Division to the champions of England. What an achievement.
Stunning, absolutely stunning stuff. Yeah, amazing achievement.
And obviously, due to their heroic campaign, Ipswich then qualified for the first ever time for European competition. The first ever tie in Europe would face Maltese opposition Florina in the preliminary round in September of 1962. They would travel to Malta for the first tie and record a comfortable 4-1 win, with, of course, Crawford and Phillips getting the 2 goals apiece.
And you'd think with having this healthy margin going into the second leg at home, maybe Alf would rest some players and, I don't know, give experience to some younger players in the squad, but you'd be wrong. And Ipswich went with a full-strength team again and certainly racked up the goals. So they defeated the Maltese champions Floriana 14-1 in the preliminary round, with Ray Crawford got 7 across both of these ties, certainly putting down a marker there.
Now in the first round proper of the European Cup. If you could say maybe Ipswich Town got lucky with their draw, you absolutely couldn't say that about who they'd draw next, and it would be none other than AC Milan up next. Ouch.
Yeah, that's certainly a step up from Floriana of Malta, isn't it? You're not going to be putting 14 past AC.
If the fans were maybe annoyed at having to travel, we haven't got a big team in the knockout round, well, no, they've definitely been given a huge tie in the first round.
Yeah. And this Milan side features Cesar Maldini, father to Pablo and now grandfather to Daniel Maldini. He himself would be a rock at the back, playing 43 times alone in the 62-63 season. They also had Giovanni Trapattoni, who was a stalwart in defence for them, Brazilian striker Jose Altafini, who would actually rack up 31 goals in 42 games through the season.
Not quite Crawford or Phillips, but decent effort from the Brazilian. For the first leg, Ipswich would travel away to northern Italy, but a surprisingly low attendance would be waiting for them, with just over 7,600 to watch this first round tie. Clearly the Milan fans do not respect Ipswich Town. The few thousand Milan fans would be treated to a routine 3-0 win, however, as Paolo Barrison grabbed 2 goals and Brazilian Dino Sani got the third just after the hour mark. After the highs of thumping Floriana, this may have felt like a bit more of a bump back down to earth for the Tractor boys.
So with little expectation of turning the tie around, Milan arrived at Portman Road. Ipswich would hit the crossbar and the AC defenders would be forced to scramble the ball off the line. But still, no goal would come Ipswich's way in the first half. Despite all of this pressure, it would be the Italians who get the first goal as Barrison continued his rich vein of form to put them ahead just after the hour mark.
Now 4 goals up on aggregate, you would think it would be plain sailing for Milan. But no, Ipswich would rally late as Crawford would obviously find the net in the 79th minute, and Blackwood would even get a second goal for the Blues in the 85th minute, making it 2-1 on the night. And unfortunately, but that's how it would end at Portman Road, so no chance of a comeback.
So losing 4-2 in aggregate, but claiming a win for their own European CV. And this result would only gain more respect as AC actually battled their way all the way through to the final, beating Zubio's Benfica at Wembley to win the 62-63 European Cup.
If you lose to the team that ends up winning the Cup, it's just universal that you can be like, well, we lost to the winners, so it's fair enough.
What could we do? And I think that's pretty respectful for your first venture into Europe.
League champions Ipswich Town meet Milan for the second leg of their first round tie. Milan, after the earlier encounter in Italy, were 3 goals up, so they began in high hopes. Only 12 minutes from the whistle, luck turned for Ipswich. A cross from Compton, touched home by Crawford. 7 minutes later, they scored again when Blackwood bounced it in off the bar. Ipswich victorious here, but defeated on aggregate.
Despite their admirable performances in Europe, things at home weren't really going quite as smoothly. Ipswich would struggle badly to repeat their form of the title-winning campaign, as really to be expected. But it would be kind of really bad as they would be dragged all the way down into a potential relegation fight.
It's that classic stereotype of second season syndrome kind of thing. But you know, it just reminds me of, like, we've seen it so many years in the Premier League, like not on the scale of where someone goes and wins the league, but like when you think of like Sheffield United came up a few years ago and they had that whole wide centre-back, overlapping centre-back thing, people didn't know what to do and they did really well. Didn't they get in Europe? They didn't quite get in Europe, but they did well. On the cusp of Europe. And then, next season, everybody then knows how to play against you.
They have the data, they know the players, and if you've got one system that really worked, like Sheffield United did, and then a couple of injuries and stuff like that happens, just a few players naturally lose a bit of form, and unfortunately things come kind of bumps back down to earth, just like Ipswich here.
Yeah, countless times.
This season will be a wild ride for the Tractor boys, as between the league form and the European form, things would already become quite unstable. But then to add to this, strangely, Alf Ramsay was awarded the England national team job, like this amazing honour, and it would start on the 1st of May. However, one little problem here is that wasn't when the season ended. There would still be 4 games left of the season to play. So a bit weird for him to like just leave before the season ended to join England. I mean, you really wouldn't see this in the modern day, that's for sure.
It seems very strange, doesn't it? And he leaves Ipswich after 8 years, having guided them from the 3rd Division South to the top of English football. Ramsay's replacement was Newcastle United legend Jackie Milburn, who would oversee the final 4 matches of the season.
It's incredible to think that Alf, for some reason, couldn't see out the last 4 games. Obviously, Alf Ramsay would go on to cement his legacy. If this achievement wasn't enough to mean that he was a great manager at Ipswich Town, he would cement it as an all-time great as he guided England to their one and only World Cup in 1966.
Pretty amazing. Like, what he's achieved at Ipswich is that a similar thing that we see, like we were saying with Ferguson, you know, when it's like he already did this amazing stuff at Aberdeen, it's like, how can it get any better? And then you see his Man United career, and then we look here, Alf Ramsay, incredible achievements at Ipswich. He gets the England job, and like the thing that we still talk about it now in 2022, like our only World Cup win. He achieved this with England as well. So yeah, he's got to go down as one of the greatest managers of all time.
When Ramsay took over as England manager, he demanded complete control over the squad selections. Previously, selections and other decisions were often carried out by board committees. Ramsay's appointment and then him taking on all these kind of responsibilities led him to being referred as England's first proper manager.
It's got to make you think, like, what if we'd have done that earlier? Maybe we'd have about 3 World Cups or something. Like, when he was appointed, Ramsay immediately caused a stir, very early Mourinho style, stating, "We will win the World Cup," which was to be hosted in England in 1966. And of course, we all know what happened then.
All our maybe outside UK listeners are saying, shut up. We hear football's coming home every 4 years, every 2 years with European and World Cup tournaments. Shut up. So,
but this time it did come up. The only time.
The one time we can say it officially did come home.
It's just facts.
Let's just move on.
So at this point, we'll say goodbye to Alf Ramsay and England doing amazing things, and we will go to the 63-64 season with Ipswich. And unfortunately, just 2 years after being crowned champions of England, and after that difficult season, which was sort of a precursor to what happens now, they finished bottom of the table and relegated to the second division, and sadly setting several unwelcome club records along the way.
After beating Burnley on the opening day of the season, so maybe Ipswich fans there going, maybe will we survive in relegation, maybe even going back for the league title. No, unfortunately. Ipswich then went 23 league and cup matches before registering their next win, the longest winless sequence in the club's history.
It's a world away from what they were doing 2 years ago. So if the Ipswich fans thought this win may spark some home form, they'd again be smashed 10-1 away at Fulham, which is still the club's biggest ever defeat. In another match schedule quirk, Ipswich would get revenge against Fulham just 2 days later, winning 4-2. But up until the last month of the season, they'd only grabbed 3 wins and 2 draws.
With their time in the top tier seemingly coming to an end with only 4 games to go, they would get 3 wins plus an exciting 4-3 win against Blackpool on the final day. But it wouldn't be enough, unfortunately, as the last run would only save them some face as they finished 22nd, 4 points away from safety. They ended the campaign having shipped 121 league goals, the highest total ever conceded by Ipswich in a single season. In addition to the Fulham debacle, they lost 9-1 at Stoke City, and they were hit for 6 goals or more in a further 5 matches.
You're not staying in any division with that.
And to add more misery to this shambolic season, it saw the departure of the club's regular strike partnership, Ray Crawford and Ted Phillips. Crawford signed for Wolves in the September of 1963, and Phillips would join Leyton Orient in the March of 1964. Jackie Milburn would also leave after this season and be replaced by Bill McGarry.
Of course, this is that difficult position with a club when Ipswich had that amazing momentum, they won the league, but now you come down the other side of the hill, and it's how they deal with that. You know, you've seen clubs go down like 3 or 4 divisions, or can they bounce back? And Bill McGarry would actually come in and he would stabilise Ipswich Town and would battle out a few years in the second division. In his first 3 years, he'd finish 5th, 15th and 5th, but he'd impress and would guide Ipswich back to the top tier by winning the 67-68 Division 2 title in his 4th year.
The Blues welcomed back Ray Crawford for the 66-67 season, and his 21 goals fired them back to Division 1.
Getting Ray back has clearly paid off beautifully, and a few things about him. So he's the all-time Ipswich Town top goal scorer, but an incredible bit of pub quiz trivia about Ray Crawford. He was the first footballer to score hat-tricks in the Football League, the League Cup, the FA Cup and the European Cup, which is very impressive.
Ahead of their return to the top flight, unfortunately, Bill would be poached by Wolverhampton Wanderers, and this is where a legendary figure and a familiar face from our Porto episode steps into our story.
I think most of our episodes we've been having, at least there's been one hugely symbolic, amazing manager, and this episode we're going all in because, you know, we've had Alf Ramsay and we're not going to stop there, because now Sir Bobby Robson is coming into our Ipswich story. Like Joey said, achieved amazing things in Porto, but here we're going to see some of his earlier career in England.
Before his legendary management days, we all have to go all the way back to his early school days, as he would then become and develop up to a player. Despite his school's headmaster not allowing their football team to join the league, Robson would play as much as he could representing Langley Park Juniors. After impressing at this level, Bill Doggin, the Fulham manager, paid a personal visit to Robson's household to offer him a professional contract. Robson snubbed the interests of Middlesbrough and opted to join the Cottagers, feeling that he had a better chance of breaking into their first team fold there.
So by 1950, he'd make his first professional appearance for Fulham. He'd actually leave to go to West Brom in 1956, moving for then a club record fee of £25,000. And after making his debut for the Baggies, he went on to become their top goal scorer in the league the next year, hitting the back of the net 24 times. However, following a disagreement with Albion's vice-chairman, Robson found himself back where his career had begun, back at Fulham.
Despite not achieving major successes at either West Brom or Fulham, he would rack up 583 appearances during his playing career. But more importantly, he would obtain his coaching qualifications during his second spell at Fulham and even coached Oxford University AFC.
And after a 5-year spell in London, a rather different sort of challenge presented itself. And Robson signed a contract with Canada's Vancouver Royals and would be their player-manager. The first step in one of the game's most romantic managerial careers. However, things wouldn't quite work out for him because Robson was forced to share joint ownership of the team with Hungarian legend Ferenc Puskás. Puskás would control the San Francisco section of the squad, while Robson would handle the Vancouver side, and basically this partnership was doomed to fail from the beginning, and Fulham offered their vacant management position. He had no hesitation with taking it.
He accepted the task at Fulham in January of 1968 and made his managerial debut against Macclesfield Town, who were then in the Cheshire County League, in the third round of the FA Cup.
His new club had been struggling. They'd collected a measly 16 points from the opening 24 games of their campaign, losing 21 out of 36. And this challenge proved to be a constant uphill struggle and one that Robson was unable to overcome. Fulham would be relegated that season, and at the end he would walk away, leaving the club in the second division. In a cruel and ill-timed twist, Robson discovered that he'd in fact been sacked by the club via an Evening Standard placard at Putney Station. Bobby would later say, "I was being eaten alive by the game I so loved."
After that downward spiral and the disappointment of not being able to save the club he had played for as a player, this is where Ipswich Town becomes part of the story, as Bobby would join the club in January of 1969. He could have easily been deemed an unaspiring choice, as at this point he was just 36 and his coaching career had begun on a disastrous note.
When Bobby joined, he said, "I've come here because I'm sure there is a great job to do here in football. Many people have given impressions of the state of the club here, and I wouldn't say that they're true. This is a club that will allow me to manage and are prepared to give me a chance." It would take time for Bobby's work to be reflected on the pitch. As for the rest of the 68-69 season, it would prove to be pretty average, with a 12th place finish. The 69-70 season wouldn't see much improvement as they slumped down the table, but Ipswich stayed away from relegation with an 18th place finish out of 22 teams.
Luckily for Robson, throughout this period he had the full support of the Cobble brothers, John and Patrick, who were the chairman, as we mentioned, the brewery boys of Ipswich Town from the 50s into the 80s.
Yeah, and this trust would be put to a test in those early struggles after a 4-2 loss to Leeds in 1970-71 season. Robson was already at loggerheads with two senior members of his team in Billy Baxter, a club legend, and Tommy Carroll. When they started making fun of Ipswich's losses, Robson had had enough and he got into a fist fight with his own player.
Robson, however, made arguably his greatest piece of recruitment during the 70-71 season by appointing Ron Gray as chief scout. Into his third season, we'd start to see the green shoots of what was to come, as a much more comfortable 13th place finish would be achieved. Robson's first great town team was beginning to take shape. Alan Hunter came in from Blackburn for £60,000 and he was paired with a 19-year-old Kevin Beattie, who was described by Gray as a streak of lightning on the ground.
Also at this time, Trevor Wymark was beginning to find his feet with the senior team. Left-back Mick Mills, still only 22, had played over 100 games. George Bailey graduated from the youth team and would form a superb tandem as right-back with Mills, while midfield mainstays like Colin Viljoen, Brian Hamilton and Mick Lambert were all there in their early 20s. So he's got a very young, malleable team here, hasn't he?
He's literally fighting with the legends, the old boys, and bringing in this new kind of new blood type of thing to forge his new ideas. The faith both Cobble brothers had put into Robson started to be repaid in the 1972-73 season, where Bobby Robson's team would start to carve out a name for itself. They kicked off the season with a resounding away victory against Manchester United, with a side featuring George Best, Dennis Law and Bobby Charlton. These are legendary names.
And this would be the start of a brilliant campaign which would see Ipswich rocket up the table, with Robson leading his team to a remarkable 4th place in the First Division, along with lifting the Texaco Cup.
So this kind of fills our interesting or dead cup competition slot for this episode. So the Texaco Cup, you might be wondering, was officially known as the International Board Competition and was started in the 1970s, involving sides from England, Scotland and Ireland that had not qualified for European competitions.
Yeah, it seems an interesting proposition. So it would be played alongside the domestic season, running from the first round in September to the two-legged finals being played in May. It was one of the first football competitions to receive sponsorship, taking the name of the American petroleum company Texaco for £100,000. And basically they'd done this to help promote Texaco's recent purchase of the Regent filling station chain.
Irish and Northern Irish clubs withdrew for the competition after the 1971-72 edition of the Cup due to, obviously, kind of political pressure at the time, competing in a separate Texaco All-Ireland Cup in 1973 to 1975.
What I love is, like, if you didn't have a confusing random competition enough, is then when it splits off and creates different variants of, like, the all-Ireland version of the normal bit. Like, it's very weird.
It would only be called the Texaco Cup for 5 seasons, as it transitioned into being the Anglo-Scottish Cup in the 1975-76 season, then running for another 5 years until the 1981 edition, when the Scottish clubs then withdrew due to the bigger English teams being less interested by fielding significantly weakened teams or entrants from further down the English tiers being the ones who would enter into this cup.
Actually, Newcastle United were thrown out of the 76-77 competition for playing a weakened team in the first leg of their quarter-final against Ayr United. And so this tournament would be renamed and reworked for just English clubs, being called the Football League Group Cup, but it only lasted 1 season before being canned as well. But yeah, we'll focus on the 5 years of Texaco.
Prime Texaco Cup, era.
I just want 5 years of normal Texaco. Will never happen.
However, we'll skip ahead to the year, as mentioned before, that Bobby Robson led Ipswich to glory in this competition.
And at this point, teams from both the Republic and Northern Ireland had withdrawn from competing in the competition, so this is just Scottish, more English teams. So this year, we had Coventry City, Crystal Palace, Leicester City, Newcastle United, Norwich City, Sheffield United, West Brom, Wolves, and of course Ipswich. And representing Scotland, we've got Ayr United, Dundee United, Hearts, Kilmarnock, Motherwell and St Johnstone. And Ipswich would actually be drawn against St Johnstone in the first round, comfortably batching them with a 6-2 win on aggregate and even winning 2-0 away in Scotland.
In the quarterfinals, they would go up against the first iteration winners Wolves, but again the Tractor Boys would make light work, winning 3-1 and again winning 1-0 away from home, so 4-1 on aggregate. Now into the final 4, with Newcastle United being faced in the semis. The first leg would end 1-1 as a draw up at St James's Park in the March of 1973, but Ipswich would get the job done with a solitary 1-0 win back at Portman Road to make sure they were on the path for the final. And who was waiting for them there, Mark?
None other than fierce Anglian rivals Norwich City.
Of course. Who else was it going to be? Obviously.
And this always happens, doesn't it? Like every episode, I think we have it all the time, and like even just in general football, anyway, a team will get to a semi-final of a cup or to a final maybe, and it's your biggest rival is there waiting for you or popping up in these key moments. And you could say like some teams didn't take the Texaco Cup seriously, but you could say that yeah, maybe even if you didn't, usually like the fact you'd be playing against your huge rivals in the final of it, like who cares what it is? Like, of course you want to beat them, and you know you're going to take it very seriously.
It's still 1 point on the bragging rights scale. It's still something you could be. We won that final. We won that. We won that. We did this. We did that. Well, you've got one Texaco Cup, and here we go. Let's see who wins it.
If it was Colchester, they'd be making their own trophy for it again, wouldn't they? So you've got to, yeah, come on, you've got to do it.
With the 2 legs of the finals set to be played only 3 days apart on the 3rd and 7th of May, everything was set for a feisty finish to the 3rd edition of the Texaco Cup. The first leg will be played at Portman Road, where it would be Peter Morris's brace that would prove to be the decisive action, despite a late goal from Norwich. That late goal may have given the Canaries some hope, but Ipswich would be ruthless 3 days later.
Yeah, 2 more goals at Carrow Road would really be the final nail in the coffin for Norwich's hopes for the silverware. Another late goal would be merely a consolation for the team in yellow, as the Tractor Boys would win the Texaco Cup 4-2, and the team would parade the trophy via an open-top bus through the streets of Ipswich, with the Ipswich Star later remarking, "It's all too easy to forget how big this was at the time. It was the start of a great era, and the Texaco Cup provided solid silver evidence of exciting progress." Of course, the fact that Norwich were our opponents added extra spice, like what we were just saying.
And best of all, for Ipswich Town, they wouldn't have to be involved in the Texaco Cup, because obviously this was made for teams not competing in Europe, and Bobby's management had guided them back to Europe, so they didn't have to deal with your Norwich cities in these little Texaco Cups anymore.
Oh yeah, so that brings us to 1973-74 season. So off the back of that fantastic 4th place finish in the league, Ipswich qualified for the UEFA Cup. So this was only the club's 2nd ever appearance in any form of competition on the continent. So yeah, we're harking back to memories of earlier in the episode when they played AC Milan, that famous win after getting knocked out in the first round. So maybe the footballing gods would take it a little bit easier on them when they're pulled out the pot, maybe. But no, they were pulled out the pot to face Real Madrid in the first round. So yeah, come on, like, this is very unlucky when you think also in the draw there's teams from Romania, Malta again, and Cyprus. I bet the Maltese team from earlier on in the episode were praying they didn't get Ipswich after the humiliation last time.
They were probably, it's like, your turn now, Ipswich. Real Madrid at this point, you know, European royalty, were under the tutelage of Miguel Munoz and boasted the likes of Amancio Amaro, Manuel Velázquez, and crossing paths with another figure we've talked about in the past in episode 2 with our Hamburg episode, it's Gunter Netzler. Real not only had a 2-time European Cup winning coach, but also had players with a wealth of continental experience in comparison to the Blues players, and the coach didn't have, unfortunately, Bob Robson had no experience at European football at all at this point.
But despite all this, Ipswich would put together a brilliant defensive performance to limit the Madristas while launching their own attacks. 7 minutes into the second half, Mills jinked past Juan Torino before unleashing a hopeful shot from just outside the box, one that took a heavy deflection, wrong foot in the goalkeeper in the process, and putting the home side amazingly 1-0 up against Real Madrid. Like, amazing stuff.
And they wouldn't hold back there. They had more chances, but a header from Hamilton was acrobatically saved, whilst Weimark missed an easy one-on-one. But were lucky to escape as Real did have the ball in the Ipswich goal, but it was ruled out for offside.
So there we go, a famous first leg victory over Real Madrid. And you've got to think, what, 5th game, and you know they've beaten Real Madrid and AC Milan also a few years before. But next up we have the second leg at the Bernabeu for Ipswich to survive, and they would produce another solid defensive performance and literally stink out the Bernabeu with a 0-0 draw. Enough to see the Blues through to the next round. So another defensive masterclass from Beattie and Hunter, and a solid performance from David Best in goal ensured this goalless draw. And wow, first round, knocking out Real Madrid, like, come on.
And this feels so similar to when Jose Mourinho would be then running around on the pitch after Inter Milan stunk out the new camp with that prime Barcelona team. It feels so eerily similar to that. It's amazing.
Love it, love it.
Now, as an Ipswich fan, you'd be crossing your fingers for a Molenbeek from Belgium or a Blok Kulbeen 1903 from Denmark. I'm sorry if there is any Blod Kuldenbeen fans who have just heard me murder their team's name. I'm very sorry.
I think you shouldn't call our listeners blood, cold and beans. It sounds very offensive.
Now, as an Ipswich fan, you'd be crossing your fingers, hoping to kind of avoid maybe another brace with AC Milan. You've just dispatched Real Madrid. But no, things wouldn't get any easier, as it would be the team from the blue side of Rome that would be Ipswich's next opponents, Lazio.
And Lazio boasted a proud defensive record of their own, having been breached just 16 times in 30 Serie A matches. But when the first league kicked off at Portman Road, the Italian side didn't know what had hit them. So Ipswich relentlessly exploited Lazio's weakness on the flanks, with Harper and Lambert infiltrating the left wing at will. Trevor Weimark used his strength and poacher's instinct to take full advantage of the confusion in the Lazio box, as he racked up 4 goals on his own in an amazing, comprehensive victory. And it was suggested that the Lazio manager, Tommaso Mastrelli, his defensive strategy and tactical tweaks completely backfired. All the goals came from Weimark's ability to be in the right place at the right time. The first goal coming as he rose highest to meet a Lambert cross, which was particularly impressive as it sent the Blues on the way. Like, come on, wow.
The cross will come over here from Lambert, and Weimark beats all those Italian defenders with the header, and that's 1-0. Colin Harper, the fullback, with another long cross. Weimark again is there, and the goalkeeper from Italy badly at fault.
Things wouldn't go quite to plan at the Stadio Olimpico, however. They couldn't really replicate their Bernabeu antics, as Ipswich conceded in the first minute. Lazio obviously then heaped on the pressure in the possible hope of a historic comeback, but Ipswich would get a huge chunk of help from the referee. Lazio pulled the Ipswich defence massively out of shape and fired in a shot as the Ipswich players scrambled on the goal line to keep them out. One shot is lashed towards the goal from outside the box, but it's diverted away by Best into the legs of an Ipswich defender on the goal line. This makes the ball loop up invitingly for a Lazio player to improvise an acrobatic attempt, which he fires into the floor but bouncing towards the far corner of the goal. An Ipswich defender on the line, who originally blocked the ball, then belly dives to try and block the ball, but misses it and clearly uses his left arm to stop the ball from crossing the line, like peak Thierry Henry keeping the ball in against Ireland type of style. The ball is diverted into Best's arms, and he gets all the Lazio players appeal for an obvious penalty, but the Dutch referee, Leo van der Croft, doesn't raise the whistle to his lips, and the play just continues miraculously.
So despite Ipswich getting away with a genuine rival to Maradona's Hand of God, Lazio would continue to dominate and get a second goal through Ginglia. after Best spilled after collecting an aimless cross with just 26 minutes on the clock. Ipswich in a rare attack would clatter the post with a strong effort in the first half, but the referee would again have a controversial say on the outcome of this match in the second half. If Lazio thought they'd been cheated already, they didn't want to know what was coming next.
A deep and just hopeful ball into the Lazio box was chased down by an Ipswich player. Naturally, a Lazio defender would shadow him in the hopes just to shepherd him out of play. But after what looks like the slightest contact, the Ipswich player would just fall to the ground. Van der Croft would obviously then point to the spot. The Lazio players surround the referee as they feel this clear sense of injustice, and if the handball wasn't dodgy enough, now conceding a dubious or soft penalty at best in Ipswich's perspective is just, oh God, awful in your home stadium as well.
But Ipswich's Colin Viljoen dispatches the penalty, and it's the Lazio players picking the ball out the net to get the game going again quickly, continuing to berate and hound the Dutch referee as they do. Even several incensed Lazio fans had to be stopped by a lot of policemen from getting onto the pitch to confront the referee himself. While we were watching the highlights, doing the research, there was a comment in Italian which we translated. I was there. The handball could even be seen from the opposite corner of the Olimpico, and at night. It's all so obvious.
Maybe he was the one trying to get on the pitch, maybe as well. You don't know. Maybe he was a fan getting clobbered by a policeman trying to berate this Dutch poor referee who, to be fair, made two clangers of decisions.
It's an amazing thought, though, to think that when you think of, like, now in 2022, you know, where Ipswich are, where Lazio are, but Lazio fans are still rattled by Ipswich, like, to this day, which I think is what a badge of honour to have. Like, incredible.
Lazio would get their heads together and you'd assume channel this sense of injustice into trying to get back into the game, and unfortunately for Ipswich they would. After the awful decision he'd made, it would smell of Leo van der Croft trying to level the scores a little bit, as Lazio would be awarded an equally soft penalty in the 83rd minute.
Such a eventful game. It's crazy. Lazio would take kindly to this decision, and Is Anglia would smash the ball home, making the score 5-3 on aggregate. But the Bianco Celesti wouldn't be done yet, as just 3 minutes later, Is Anglia would scramble the ball over the line to make it 5-4 in the tie and round off a hat-trick for himself on the night. But at the death, as Lazio pressed forward to complete the comeback, Ipswich picked them off on the counter-attack, as David Johnson, who'd been substituted on, had a lovely long ball loft into his path, which he stroked past Felice Pulici to put the tie beyond doubt, 6-4 to finish in fantastic style, with the Tractor Boys really riding their luck. But wow, what a result away in Europe as well. So, you know, Real Madrid are done, they're out, Lazio are out, Ipswich are seriously on the march in the UEFA Cup.
And who would be up next? It would be, in fact, a team from the same nation as the referee who'd kind of given them a helping hand into the next round. It would be FC 20. Again, the first leg will be played at Portman Road, with Wyman being the deciding factor with the lone goal in the 83rd minute. And unlike their trip to Rome, it would be a slightly nicer trip to Eastern Holland, as Ipswich ran out 2-1 winners. So again, Portman Road is unbeaten against AC Milan, FC 20 and Real Madrid at this point, and Lazio.
Fortress. Peter Morris got them ahead just after the hour mark before Brian Hamilton would double the advantage with 20 minutes to go. 20 would get that one goal in the 87th minute, but yeah, it would prove to be a consolation as the Blues passed their way into the quarter-finals of the UEFA Cup. So yeah, once again, you're looking back at the names they've overcome, and then you're looking at who's left in the hat for the quarters. And you've got to say, by this point, if you're not feeling it already after the quality of teams you've knocked out, Ipswich fans have got to be fancying their chances here. So the other 7 teams in the hat, we've got Cologne and Stuttgart from West Germany, Vitória Setúbal from Portugal, Feyenoord of Holland, Ruch Kurzau from Poland, and Tottenham Hotspur, probably the biggest name in the pot at the time and now as well. And finally, the team Ipswich would be paired against, it's Lokomotiv Leipzig from East Germany.
As soon after the first leg, those dreams of a potential UEFA Cup semi-final were oh so close to becoming a reality, as an 86th minute Kevin Beattie goal handed them a victory at home. So once again, Portman Road being a fortress, completely unbeaten against all European opposition they faced. Incredible.
Back in Leipzig, though, things wouldn't quite go to plan, as both a red card and an unanswered equaliser from Lokomotiv's Giesner meant that the game would trundle into extra time and then penalties. So Ipswich's luck would run out in the shootout as Alan Hunter missed the decisive penalty that sent the East German team into the semis. And after overcoming so much to go out like that, it's really got to hurt. But for Ipswich's second ever journey into Europe, full of underdog spirit, determination, 2 things that Bobby Robson exuded and displayed his whole managerial career. So this team really played in his image, and amazing achievement to get this far.
Punched well above its weight, and by this point he had left a superb impression on his European debut. This was his first ever campaign in Europe, you've got to remember. While back in the domestic campaign, Ipswich would once again get another 4th place finish. This meant another crack at Europe for the Tractor Boys. So their first trip into Europe under Bobby Robson has gone incredibly well. However, we're going to save the upcoming European travels for part 2 of our episode here on Ipswich Town.
I think this will lead us into a wonderful era that's remembered by a lot of Ipswich fans that hopefully are listening.
So that's been us, the Journeymen, up to this point. So join us next time for some impressive success on both the domestic and European fronts with Bobby Robson, as well as Ipswich Town's story up to the present modern day.
Yeah, really looking forward to keep going with it. Really enjoyed so far the Ipswich journey and seeing how they've gone from being an amateur club for so long to then having 2 hugely influential managers who, interestingly, both go on and have very good England careers as well as England managers. It's been amazing to see, and really looking forward to getting into the rest of the stuff, and hope you've enjoyed it.
As I've said, I didn't know too much about this team before jumping into this, and while the stories have already been amazing, and they only get better in part 2. So we're going to sign off here. Make sure, if you've enjoyed this, a share, a like, anything on social media will really help us grow. We'd really appreciate it. And apart from that, that's been the Journeyman here on Ipswich Town, Episode 5, Part 1. I'm Joseph Corlett.
I'm Matt Reeves.
See you next time.
Join us next time and see you soon.